let's see, do we have the next panel ready?
We do.
Oh, great. Thank you, Jonathan. This is going to be a really interesting one. It's called Internet Renaissance, the Emerging Creative Economy in Web3. And we have 5 very talented speakers. Going to present them one by one. Scott Boomer from Gitcoin. Hey, Scott. We have Pri Desai from OpenLAw.
Hey.
Hi, how's it going?
Good.
Jess, oh, really good. We have Jess Sloss from SeedClub.
What's up, guys?
Blake Kathryn, artist.
Hello.
Hello. And we have Reuben Bramanathan, I'm really sorry, from IdeoVC. Hey, Reuben.
Hey, Mariana. Hi, everyone.
Well, oh, there's a mosquito here. I'm sorry, it's summer in Buenos Aires. Okay, now that I have the 5 of you here, I'm going to jump off and just let you carry on a nice conversation. So please take it away.
Awesome. I feel like any of us can really start. Jess, maybe if you want to start with an introduction and we can go around the room, just kind of introduce what we're doing in the creative economy in the first place, and then we can take things from there.
Sounds good. Nice to see you all. My name's Jess, and I am the instigator at SeedClub. SeedClub is a social token incubator, so we help creators navigate this wild, weird world of Web3. And we've just recently launched our second cohort. We have 11 projects that we're working with over a 6-week period to help them design and launch a social token. So I'm glad to be here. Guess maybe I should pass it on to Pri.
Hey, everyone. Glad to be here. I work for a project called OpenLAw, which puts together legal DAOs. We put together the LAO, which is a venture-based, community-driven DAO. And outside of the LAO, another DAO was born called Flamingo, which is specifically related to the NFT space. I also help Jess a little bit on the SeedClub side of things. So kind of just super interested in the creator economy in general, both on the NFT digital art side, but of course also like the social token side too.
We all have the same order. I think I'm next, but I don't know because some apps do that and some don't. But I'm Scott. I work at Gitcoin. We're enabling creators to work for the open internet, especially developers. And I also help just with SeedClub. I think we're going to see a common trend on that front. Some really interesting stuff happening in both the NFT and social space, which we'll get into in a minute. And then I believe Reuben is below me. Is that true for everyone?
Hey, everyone. I'm Reuben. I'm an investor at IdeoColab Ventures, but like a lot of folks here, we work on a lot of joint projects together, like SeedClub, the LAO, Gitcoin. And I think from my perspective, it's a fascinating space to think about this Web3 dream actually coming to fruition, like right in front of our eyes. It's amazing to be here. Blake.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Blake Kathryn. I'm a digital artist. I've been around the block in the digital space for about 5 years now, but with crypto approaching maybe a year or not a year and a half, a half a year, and really just dove right into it. I'm mostly in the NFT space for now and am definitely intrigued further and further with the social tokens, which has kind of just gotten on my radar. But yeah, really excited to chat with you guys today. I love that we're all from such different backgrounds.
Actually, so Blake, given that you are really like the core creator here, I mean, we all work on projects, but like realistically, like you are the target audience for a lot of like the NFT space, a lot of the social space in terms of thinking through the problems this is solving for you. So like maybe one sort of stage setting thing we could do would be just to understand sort of, what was your experience like in Web 2 and sort of just like building, creating art in that space, and how have you seen any have you seen really any differences in how the community in Web3 is engaged on that?
Yeah, I mean, as a whole, I think it just goes in general. I can't speak too technical between Web 2 and Web 3, as I am very much on the visual versus development side, and I'm still acquainting myself with those terms. But as a whole, like with the traditional sense of web and creation, like it is a very much you rely on others. Like I rely on clients, I rely on exposure. Granted, not that free kind, but I had to very much like a guerrilla market myself in a really intense way. And what I'm seeing, what's so fun right now, especially at least with my experience in the NFT space, is how there's kind of just this Wild West moment of feeling like you can really just discover anyone. You can turn a corner and there's something totally new or refreshing. And it kind of gives back this like individualized power as a creator, I feel. And of course, that then leads into hopefully commercial gains, which has allowed me to have more control into both my craft and my career or artist projection. So it's been really positive, honestly.
That's awesome. And I guess like you have done a bit of work on this front, like with Flamingo, like both, I think with Blake actually, but then also with other artists. Like, how has that been on your front? Like, what are you seeing there? And then by the way, like, I'm kind of, I guess, moderating, but like, we don't really need to. I told like everyone earlier, like we can just kind of do like a kind of random clubhouse style, like anyone jump in. Don't feel like I'm the only one that like needs to guide things.
Totally. Thanks. Yeah. So for those of you, I guess, who aren't familiar, Flamingo is a community of people who are enthusiastic about the NFT space and want to collect and really push the boundaries of what you can do once you acquire, an NFT. So we created a DAO for these folks who wanted to collect. The idea there is just to pull capital and get NFTs of all different types. I guess the strategies have really been everything from like digital art to collectibles to gaming assets and even investing in underlying NFT infrastructure. So, I mean, coming from that vantage point, I think what people, and at least, my gleaning on the membership of Flamingo, a lot of what's fascinating is not only like this curation aspect of the DAO of people really kind of in a way taste making or signaling to the community what they want based on this DAO, but some of the fun things you can do once you actually have an NFT. It's awesome to flex your collection on Twitter or whatever app is out there and show off your wallet address to show, signal your taste. And I think that's kind of actually been really interesting to watch as well, see these curator tastemakers emerge, but also some of what could be done in the metaverse too, like putting up a gallery or museum in the metaverse somewhere to display a collection, or even thinking about like DAOifying an artwork. So having a bunch of we purchased the CryptoPunk alien a few weeks back, which got a couple headlines, but there's thoughts about DAOifying that and maybe like creating a almost like an avatar or personality around the alien, merch that could emerge, derivative work that we've already seen, like people create a derivative work of that. And, with NFTX, we're seeing like bundles of work. So I think that there's some fun things that can emerge. And of course, like at the end of the day, we're all here to create a better creator economy. And I think finding a group of people to push the boundaries on some of where you could actually take a work once you acquire it has been really interesting, I think, from my angle. And we've really just gotten started there. So it doesn't stop from just collecting, I think.
I actually like, part of me wants to transition into talking a bit about like the social stuff, but actually I do have a quick follow up there, which is like, so you're talking about like the DAOification of different kinds of like individual art pieces. The other thing that came up in a conversation yesterday with the foundation team was this idea of like, what is the equivalent almost of like texture or like scale in art? Like you have this experience in physical art of like being in the gallery, of like seeing the art in person. Like, do you see these sorts of like DAOification mechanisms or like interactivity mechanisms as like almost an analog of that? Like, do you see there being like, and actually Blake, you as well, like, do you see there being kind of a distinction between, and is it like purely a difference, or is it also like, is there an augmentation or detraction, like in terms of how people interact with digital art versus other pieces that you might have made in the past?
Yeah, I mean, on the DAO side, it's kind of cool because you have a community rallying around a creator and supporting that piece and kind of going beyond, what maybe even the artist's intent was, or giving a personality. So I think, yeah, in a way, it's augmented. The experience of that work has completely been augmented by a community that's rallying around it and a creator, which is kind of weird, but like very cool. And then beyond that, in a very tangible way, like if you go to a metaverse and like wear Oculus lenses and decide to like look at a piece like that, I think experience and visual experience is entirely different than like going to a museum. It's not that it's better or worse, but it's like, a 3D augmented reality. Like we're going to see all these pieces kind of hit at once, and you can then purchase that and take that from one world to another. And I think those kind of things it's just a different artistic experience. And I mean, I'd love to hear what Blake thinks about that, but I do think that it is augmented, I guess, in many ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And honestly, a lot of times, even because, again, I'm coming from the artist side here, when I chat with colleagues who have maybe been skeptical or just now getting into the space and try to kind of onboard them in an easy way, it is one of those things where, if I show them a Decentraland gallery, for example, they're immediately like, oh, this is amazing. Whereas if I show them someone's XYZ.com website, they're just like, well, this is just a different social platform and it doesn't impact me. And they don't view it as that same tier, without those comparisons of the more tangible one, like Priya was saying, with like having a space, whether that's an AR, VR, et cetera, to be able to go and have almost like this copy paste, but digital version of the gallery experience. Because there is that stereotype in your head as a creator that you need to have some kind of grandiose display at some point if you're selling your works for a certain threshold. So I do love to see that creativity. And I know that we're really early in that, and there's so much limitations still with being able to build these really high fidelity kind of experiences, but it's really exciting to see. And I do think that I don't compare it so much to a gallery. Like if I could go in person, like I would love to see what a crypto gallery would look like in person. Like I'm sure I would geek out and it would be amazing and stick with me much more than hopping on a browser or putting on goggles and seeing it in that way. But I still do like that we're bridging that gap and that we are going from here's a thumbnail to, okay, here's a bit past that. And now you can actually walk around, have your avatar. Maybe you're having a voice chat with a buddy, across the country or something while you're both appreciating art together.
Just following on from that, Blake, you mentioned some of the things that are getting creators excited about this whole space, and then you mentioned some things that would get your fans and supporters and community excited. Where do you think we're seeing the most progress? Right? Is it creators or is it kind of fans coming in first and kind of forcing creators to really consider the NFT medium?
I think it's a mixed bag. I do think there's a very good pressure. Like there is a good peer pressure, with your audience or, patrons, viewers, etc., to do well, like I think that it's helping, in my opinion, especially because, again, digital artists, we're kind of like, we're cursed to only social media for so long with being able to get our work out there. It's kind of forcing you to take a stop away from fast art, that like really quick content creation and look at your practice in a more meaningful way. So I do think that it's very heavily relied on the community, and I think it's better for it.
I think before you step away from NFTs, it is funny how there's one creator, and Blake, I absolutely love your work. It's fantabulous. But I think there's the initial thing of collecting art is an easy way to understand NFTs, but this world is just going to open up so much over the next little while. And we've even seen that in recent weeks with the SA token and this crowdfunding of the written work. And Reuben, I know, deeply involved with Zora and just sort of this crypto media movement that's happening as well. So I think this is a space that already might seem like to many as if it's really just a runaway freight train and maybe a bit too late. But I think the space is so early in the types of media that are going to be minted, and even just like the understanding of why somebody would want to own one of these things, which I think touches on like the idea of where does it get displayed. But I think there's sort of this nuanced understanding of why owning an NFT is going to be interesting and valuable, not only as a flex, but as some sort of deeper sense of ownership and participation in this creator economy.
Yeah, I just want to add something that I think we haven't seen much of yet, but I'm hoping to, and I think we will, is this idea of like metaverse and virtual economies that emerge, like stores and other things. Like, I mean, like you could have your own gallery at some point, and it would just, you know, you could be there with an avatar to, you know, entertain it. I've seen like sneaker shops. I think there was one a few years ago in crypto voxels. So I think it'll be kind of interesting when we see people, you know, pushing NFTs in kind of stores and online economies. I'm, you know, it hasn't quite taken off yet, but I feel like it may in the next few years.
The one, like, just follow-on idea to that, going to the essay point again as well, like the DAOification of like individual art pieces is really cool. But the one other concept that came up in another conversation was the idea of like having a sort of like, I'm like a huge nerd, like D&D is something that I like participate in. And like, you could almost have collaborative storytelling in which like parts of its story are like managed by the community, and like those are, you know, those written works in like a mirror sort of type environment, going back to the platform Jess was mentioning that did the essay token. And I think that sort of collaborative art, like, or those sets of collaborative collections, whether they're written or whether they're like just, you know, visual art, like I think in both those cases, there's a lot of really cool elements that like just weren't possible before, unless you had like 1,000 like galleries that you could like put into one single room and like somehow get to coordinate with each other.
I have another question for Blake as a creator and Pri as a collector and curator. What are we missing, right? When we, the builders, are designing protocols and platforms with what we think creators and collectors want, what are some of the things that we're missing that you can see right now?
I have to think on this. So Pri, you can go first.
Yeah. Like, it's hard to say like what's missing right now since it's happening so quickly. So it's like, I think, you know, things are moving pretty quickly. I think maybe there's a lot of, I think what's maybe missing is kind of the communication into and bringing more people along. Although I think that's kind of slowly happening pretty quickly. You know, more and more friends are reaching out about NFTs. I think still there's like that conversation about like, well, can't you screenshot something? Like, isn't that the same? And it's like, no, it's not, but okay. And then like, so, I mean, I think that there's some, I mean, that's not really a good answer. On like a technical sense, I'm sure there's like a lot that needs to be done. I mean, I guess the thing that everyone always complains about is like UX and this idea of like, making it easy to buy in a one-stop shop, or like, how do I see my collection, or how do I display my collection? Like, I think like that all will get answered over time, but I guess in the short term, maybe that, I mean, I'll continue to think on that one.
We just need more people doing stuff, more people doing more interesting things. That's the answer to everything.
I don't know if I could keep up.
Love it. This isn't so much like, I guess, literal in what is missing, but one thing that's come up with a lot of my close friends who are also NFT artists and myself is that when you compare it to the other side of the art world, which is just basically not crypto art, that you have a lot of curation and art critics, and there's not really that voice here yet on that in either the curation or the critic side. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do find it's interesting that it lacks a presence. So that's something I'm just kind of curious and would love to hear other people's opinions on too, because there is something with having those types of voices and those formal writings and reviews that do kind of help elevate a creator or a collection or a piece. And so it's just something I've noticed that is missing, and I'm curious as to it.
I would actually love to see more community curation. Like, I would love to see, we do have a lot of platforms which are just like, and actually Flamingo DAO, it's kind of bad. Like, I really think like you should make like a Flamingo DAO gallery if there's not one already. Maybe I'm like, that's actually in the works probably. But like,
yeah,
awesome. Like, I think that sort of is to me really, really cool. Like, yes, it's nice to have these platforms where you have just individual creators like getting sort of like whitelisted onto this platform, but you ultimately want it to be a collaborative process. And you have, someone mentioned that this idea of like gallery curators aren't just picking artists. They're like trying to tell a story amongst like all the different artworks that are in their gallery, and trying to like let you go through like a narrative as you go through the like physical space. And like, there isn't really that kind of like level of detail I think people are putting into like the curation, at least yet. But like, I think that's coming.
Yeah.
So Yeah, I mean,
it's funny. It's like thinking about curation in general. I feel like I guess that space is still emerging. I mean, you have some platforms doing the curation for you, like Foundation is a great example.
Totally.
I mean, Super Rare. Others are kind of there's a million amazing platforms, but it'll be interesting when we start seeing like the emergence of these like mega tastemakers, like almost like a Substack type of like you could almost subscribe to the tastemaker to see like what artists they're recommending. Like I would imagine that may slowly emerge as like people start garnering followings based on what they like. I mean, you've kind of seen that with like the Museum of Crypto Art and others.
I actually wonder if this is a good segue into the social token part of this, because like there is this element in which like these social tokens or community tokens start to be used for whether it's like curation or whether it's for like trying to find those like 100 true fans of a piece of artwork or some given like artist's work. Like RAC is a good example that comes to mind of this. I don't know, Jess, Reuben, if you want to talk a bit to those points.
Sure. I mean, I think what's interesting, I think, is that curators are going to be extremely valuable and be able to capture a lot of the value that they create in the space. And maybe the types of people and the types of curation are going to expand quite a bit compared to having to, run a gallery versus, it's probably going to be much more like having a popular blog back in the early 2000s, right? Like, but being able to monetize it actually. So I think, two things. One, I really, when I use the term creator, I'm thinking in the broadest possible sense of which it captures artists, it captures people who are bringing communities together on the internet. It's small squads of people that are creating value all the way through to individuals or large groups at the same time. And so I think Web3 technologies empowering that type of work is just the most fascinating thing for me right now. More specifically, we have 11 projects that we're working with right now, and one of them is an NFT that is essentially going to be building a virtual influencer sort of personal brand around them. And the core thing that they and their community will do is curate NFT art. And so they have some really interesting mechanisms that are involved with that. And so the I think potential for how NFTs interact with social tokens is just fascinating. But we're seeing, use cases across the board. So ways of bringing people together to collaborate and create written content and reward creators to reward their fans as well, all the way through to sort of unlocking some vaults of photographs and media that have been locked away in some vault in Africa for many years, and turning that over to the community and looking at different ways of monetizing that. And I think we start to play in and around the DAO space and mechanism design and cooperatives, and it just gets really, really interesting really quickly. And the only sort of big thing that I put out there is that everything is so early in the space, and I think my answer before of like we just need to do more of this is something that I truly believe, especially in the social token space, and we're just really excited to see all these projects come out and learn and ideally flourish. But I know Reuben has some interesting experiences in this space as well.
Oh, Jess, those are some great examples. And I think like we've seen a few different eras already of personal and community and social tokens as people realize like how these things can actually generate and share value. At the very start, I think people had the idea that you could just like launch a coin or launch a token and all of a sudden it should have value. But I think, the narrative, especially in the second half of last year, is around that being a way to share and collaborate and distribute value rather than actually generate it. So the NFT component like fits really nicely into the social token component as a way to actually like converge value on content, and then have the community like be able to share and create and generate that value. So zooming right out, the really nice thing about Ethereum is that it lets you create a token, and when you create a token, you can have it represent anything that you can imagine. The hard part is getting other people to imagine it too. So when you kind of reach that point, you have to kind of zoom back in and think, okay, well, what is the unique thing that this social token is doing that's going to result in other people valuing that token as well as you. So I think that's why I'm super excited about this intersection of NFTs as representing value in content, and the social tokens representing the value in the people creating that content.
I really love that framing. Yeah, like there's a sort of like level of, having like the gallery example maybe is good, right? Like you can have people managing this gallery together, which happens to have this artwork, which maybe builds in, has its own programmable cash flows of sorts, we'll say. And I think that ultimately having that sort of ability to like track that together as a community is really powerful. I don't know, like what are the different, like when would someone, in your opinions, choose to do, just NFT art versus like a social token? Like I know we've talked about this problem, right? Like, is it really always good for people to be creating tokens? Like what's like the most interesting, so maybe example of a social token you've seen today where you think that really like made like sense? I can really see the value in that.
I mean, I think you said earlier, like RAC is a great example. I really love, I think it goes well with what Reuben said about like the distribution of the value, where it's like, you support me and it's like, here's these cool cassette tapes or this or that. And it does feel like a really like even playing field to be able to kind of like, in an artist, since I almost look at it as like a Patreon, even though that's probably like a bad comparison to make with it. But it does feel like you can really build this like rewarding multi-tiered kind of environment going off that kind of structure. And I personally, as an outsider, and again, very, very new to learning about social tokens, thought that was a really awesome and tangible example that I could grab from, especially being a musician, since I know music is still not as popular as like visual art, et cetera, with the tokenizing kind of world.
What I kind of like about social tokens, because I think they're actually very complementary, NFTs and social tokens. I mean, I like this idea, and RAC is a great example of someone who's kind of really pushed the boundaries here as like a Grammy-winning producer, whatever. He already had the community and the foothold to begin with, so he's an excellent candidate for this kind of thing. But what I kind of find interesting is now that he has this token, he can actually create NFTs and redeem it for his token. And the more and more people that, you can create a sub community using that token. And let's say you're a mega fan, you could accept payment in that token and create like a micro economy based on his work as a super fan. And so having more and more people transact in your social token only creates a larger network effect and thereby just makes you more popular and bigger. And I think kind of creating these micro economies around a certain person and their fandom. And I actually remember like reading something about like fish fans, like they have all of these merch, like sub communities in the, I mean, if you're a fish follower, you'd kind of get that, but there's like people, and the Grateful Dead similarly, like they have all these people making merch using all this, copyrighted stuff. But if you, and whatever, like I'm sure that the bands are fine with that, but if you had that transaction occur in that domain native currency, I think that's pretty powerful. That only, you don't have to necessarily worry about some of these copyright IP issues. Your network is growing because people are buying that merch with your social token. So some of those, like, I think components like go away if you have a token and everyone's kind of leveraging that in your network. But anyways, yeah, I think there's something there for sure.
It's a great point about RAC. He spent many years building a very loyal community, a very tight-knit group of fans and supporters, and he was able to kind of create an instant network by distributing RAC tokens and giving the value back to the community. But what we also need to be doing is making sure we enable new, emerging, and underrepresented artists to be able to like get started by kickstarting a community. If it's only existing, established artists that we're serving, then I think that would be a massive failure.
Yeah, I think that's the challenge and opportunity right now is that we're seeing some templates that are working, RAC, friends with benefits, RNG, this idea of holding tokens to get access to a community and the ability to sort of bring a community together around a token, I think is fascinating. It doesn't create a revenue stream for artists necessarily. So it's not quite like a Patreon. It's pretty different in that it's got a lot of other benefits to it, but I think that's an important note that is often missed. And I think, the other thing is it's not a substitute for doing all the creation and all the community building that needs to happen to create value on the internet. And so we often talk about the importance of either, bringing somebody's social capital or pooling together a group of people's social capital to then launch a token within. And I think, that's still necessary. We're very focused right now on sort of how we turn that capital into something that can be valuable long-term and create more value. But I think that early stage stuff is, I think, going to be solved as creators then begin to reach out into their fan groups and bring them in and act as platforms to help launch other creators. But these are far from a sort of magic wand at this point, though sometimes it kind of feels like that, or at least we hope it feels like that.
This is a great discussion. I know we're pretty much like 1 minute left. Any final closing thoughts just on the space, on the future? I actually feel like, Jess, that was like a great sort of summary of like where I think we're going as well. Final words from anyone, and then I'll make sure Jonathan doesn't kill me for going too far over.
Okay.
Sure. I mean, I'd just say that this is I think, Blake, you were talking about just the excitement of being in something new and seeing new things around every corner. And that's how I feel like my life is right now. And I just want to welcome people in, come join the party. There's so much interesting, exciting things. The folks that are on stage here have been wildly supportive of myself getting into the space. And I know we're eager to do that for others as well. So find us on the internet. Social Token and the NFT space is warm and welcoming, and we'd love to see you a part of it.
I think that's a good note to end it on. So, I mean, we're actually, Mariano, there's some backstage stuff happening here where you're trying to decide what's happening with the next talk. How's that going?
Yeah, so I've heard you talking about social tokens and community tokens for the last few minutes. And our next guest, James Young, was going to be talking about just that. He thought he was going to be on a panel, but turns out that he's actually going solo. But what do you say if we just invite him over to the conversation and we can keep it going for another 20 minutes? And because I'm sure he will be able to share a bunch of interesting things about communities and how to build them around tokens, and just think it's going to be good. How about that?
I'll hop to create some space for James, but thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mariano.
Cheers, Reuben.
Take care, Reuben.
I'm a huge James fan personally. He's coming back online. There we go. So I'm down to stay. Yeah, I mean, like I know that feeling of like not like panels versus presentations are very different beasts. And so like I'm happy to just like even jam on like collab land specifically, because I think there's a lot there that's really relevant to what we just talked about. So maybe James, if you want to just do like a quick intro and we can go from there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, and appreciate everyone sticking on. I don't have to like go solo for 20 minutes. So much appreciated. Yeah, so my name is James Young. Have a consumer product for communities called CollabLand. And we have a bot that works on Telegram and on Discord. And that bot makes sure that everyone in a channel holds a certain token at a certain threshold. And so if you have a token, great, you can be in that chat room. If you move those tokens out of your wallet, the bot will remove you from the channel. And so we've seen a lot of interesting kind of emergent design. And really the idea of the CollabLand bot, the kind of thesis is in line with crypto in general, where we believe in terms of crypto, reducing the coordination costs. So, everyone holds a token and they're all incentivized and motivated, to make that token accrue value. And that's the Schelling point. My whole background prior to doing CollabLand has been in layer 2 research, and more specifically with DAOs. And what was really interesting and what really challenges my assumptions, because we are just at this beginning, this new frontier, was, I've been through the whole like bull, bear, now we're getting up to this new bull run here, and gas prices are killing me, just kind of an aside at the moment. what I thought, looking at like 2017 and you saw the bull run, it's all pure speculation. And I was very much like anti-token. You can't have a token just speculating. And so it helped create this Moloch DAO, which had no token, and it was just skin in the game. And what I thought was, to build online communities, you had to have no token. You had to start with this level of trust, and once this trust has been built, then you can introduce a token. Once we launched CollabLand, what I saw emerge was really challenging to my initial assumptions of that. Because, for example, I saw one of these communities called Meme, and Meme Token, their only feature at the very beginning was the CollabLand bot. And then, after it started as a joke, they launched the token. You needed 100 tokens to get into the Citadel, and CollabLand managed that group. And they said, hey guys, like, what should we do now? And it was an interesting kind of psychological thing where, everyone else in the chat room knew that everyone else had the token. So there was more of this like focus to like try to come together and make something happen. And in 2 weeks time, they had launched this idea of NFT farming. And with NFT farming, it kind of just took off, right place at the right time. And I just remember like when they launched that feature, the 24-hour transaction volume for Meme just shot up to like $1 million. And I was like, whoa, like, I always thought you needed trust first, and then you put this transactional element of social tokens on top. But you had this community Meme that just came together as a joke, and really they were aimed for a specific goal was to increase the value of this token, and like they made it work. I don't know if it's the exception that proves the rule, or because we're so early on, is this a way of being able to form online communities? And so, yeah, it's just super interesting. I think that we don't talk enough about, the initial token issuance and the initial distribution of the token. And we kind of jump ahead to like, okay, what are we going to do with this token and whatnot? But I think the mechanics of the initial distribution and the bootstrapping phase, not the steady state, but the bootstrapping phase of the token is important and critical. And I've seen it so many times with social tokens. What will happen is someone will launch a token, and someone will provide liquidity for it on Uniswap, and there's like a bunch of bots that are running on Uniswap that will like start pumping the token, and then once the people start hearing about it, they buy the token on Uniswap, and then the price will dump because these bots are just front running everyone else, and then will sell. And then so you get people that are starting the community that are initial members, and they're a little salty because they're like underwater from like day one. So it's like, really important when you talk about tokens, because you're adding this extra dimension or element of price that could be somewhat stressful, because now you're trying to grow a community, but you have these users that, may not be in it for the long haul. They just want short-term number go up. So you can see that there's this like tension between, short-term incentive versus long-term value of what you're really trying to build from a community perspective. And so I think,
how do you think like that actually, like with respect to those kinds of like decisions, like how does someone prevent short-termism from like coming into their community? How do you avoid that kind of problem in your mind?
Yeah, so I've seen some communities that will have kind of a master issuer, and they'll like just depending on how people react in Discord or Telegram, and the value that they provide in terms of discussion, they'll start just tipping them. And this is where the initial distribution comes into play. They refuse to provide liquidity on Uniswap for the token and are just hand issuing it. And just through social norms via the culture of the community will say, please don't provide liquidity for the token yet. And what you see is people in the community saying, okay, I'm holding this token and I want to see value for it. And you see these initial creators that are holding these tokens and doling them out. It's a lot of work because you have to read all the messages. You're really cultivating and kind of herding cats. And then, you know, what eventually happens is when enough people want liquidity for that token, you see these community admins kind of break down and say, okay, Q3 of this year, or, you know, 90 days or whatever, so that people, you know, don't go rogue, and then provide the liquidity. So, you know, having crypto and the ethos of like permissionless is great, but it's hard at the same time because, you know, people can kind of have their own agendas. So it's really important when you're starting to create the proper foundation. I think so that's really tricky.
I think that's one of the things that the broader crypto space kind of doesn't quite get, or they look at what's happening in social tokens and they go, well, okay, but there's so much trust that I have to rely on here. Like if I'm holding Alex tokens, there's nothing that's holding him accountable to actually give the percentage of his earnings out or to follow through and give tokens out in the future for future projects he works on. So like inherently there's trust in that relationship. Same with any of the communities that we see out there where there's a central issuer or, and I think the trust goes quite a way. And so I think what's interesting is like, that's totally fine and should really be leaned into in the short term, where we want to create these expectations and norms. And, you know, there's a bunch of design decisions that can be made as to whether a token should be tradable or not. And I think those are all interesting, but at the core, it's like, can you bring people together that you like and can build a sense of trust in a vision and a direction that you're going in? And that actually carries you through quite a bit of the setup phase, at least. And I think what we're going to see as more tools get built out is that those tools will reduce the trust required and therefore allow these communities to scale quite a bit. Previously, we're talking about, you know, NFTs and on-chain revenue, et cetera. And I think that's kind of something that unlocks that social scalability that blockchain brings to the world. But I don't think it's necessary right now. And I think we're going to see a lot of smaller communities start up using tokens as kind of a coordinating mechanism, really built on trust, built on promises. And some of those are going to scale as tools, technology, or at least the zeitgeist, I guess, catches up with them.
James, I kind of have a quick question. I guess this is more of like the psychology of a community token, but I mean, I'm a part of a few tokenized communities, and they're, you know, obviously have been fairly successful, as I wouldn't necessarily be a part of them, but I'm curious, like from your vantage point, is binding a community before a token lead to a more successful outcome for a said community, or is kind of starting with that token and then seeing how the community gels and what they do with it a better outcome? I'm sure it's like, you know, variable depending on the community and the people, but, you know, my feeling is sometimes if you throw a token, it can kind of build that trust automatically and it can lead to a successful community. You were kind of touching on that, but I mean, based on all the communities you've seen, I'm just, you know, curious as to what's gone on with that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is what I'm trying to really figure out. The mental model that I have is this community transactional by nature, or is it trust-based by nature? And there's another dimension to it. Is there extrinsic value? Are they motivated extrinsically by just price, or are they motivated intrinsically by some core value that they're trying to like push forward in terms of community? And I think there's this trying to figure this out. But in my mind, there's like this multi-dimension, intrinsic, extrinsic, trust versus transactional. And what's interesting to me is I see like communities like Meme that went from transactional to trust. And I've seen other communities that were based on trust turn transactional. So it's like trying to understand is there data points, like whether they're on chain or off chain, sentiment analysis that you can actually run to see if a community is turning from transactional to trust or trust to transactional, extrinsic to intrinsic or intrinsic to extrinsic. I think there are these like borderlines. So I don't think a community is just one thing and it kind of stays there. It's always evolving and morphing. And I've seen communities that were like, I didn't really care for or think that had any value. It was just like a lot of speculation that actually it kind of grew and it turned great. And I've seen the opposite. So it's really like, is the extrinsic, intrinsic trust versus transactional the right framing? And is there like measurements that you can put to see when like different communities like cross that threshold? Because I think right now we just need a lot better metrics. So you can go to CoinGecko or whatnot and you can just see price action. But I think price action is like looking in the rear view mirror and trying to drive forward. Because it's all things that have passed. And so we need better metrics like how long has the average member of the community held the token? If people are churning in and out, then you're like, oh, okay, this is more transactional. If you have people that are holding that have never sold, then you're like, okay, this is more trust-based. Even if the price, especially if the price is volatile, you have like strong hands. And I think that's like really important to like talk about when you look at like community-based tokens. So I'm still trying to reason about it. And every time I think I figured it out, like there are a couple of examples that kind of break that mold. And so I'm still trying to grasp at this and trying to do this in a way that's a bit more data-driven or scientific if possible. But I'm not quite sure yet.
It'd be interesting to see, and I don't know if this exists. I'm sure there must be some research in like Reddit communities and other Web2 communities to see. I mean, like, for example, if you looked at GameStop, that was in a way transactional, but they also had their own lingo and ideology and, you know, culture within that. So I would describe that as both trust and transactional. But, you know, it'd be kind of just, I think, maybe taking some lessons there and seeing what happens. Because I think to your point, it probably does ebb and flow between the two, or it could be both. But yeah, I mean, I just think that's fascinating to see the evolution of how these may come. And I'm sure if like there is some major price volatility that can also change, you know, people's incentives. So yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, like Wall Street Bets is super fascinating. And I think that like, you know, it is transactional. The way I see it is that there's some really strong hands there that won't sell no matter what, right? And so that ups the floor. And so how many of those strong hands do you need to make the community viable? What happens if, you know, from a metrics perspective, you see you know, those strong, one of them in the pillars of the community, like sell? Does that mean that the whole community falls apart? It's really funny. Early on, we had a bug in collab land where we would only indicate if people got kicked out of a chat room every 12 hours because we didn't want to like spam the room. And there was one community I was in, and there were a bunch of people that sold across that 12-hour time span. But at that 12-hour mark, you saw like 10, 12 people leave the room, and then everyone else panic sold. And so it was like, oh, we said, okay, well, we can't have that from like a feature perspective. And we just got to like, when people like sell, just immediately like show in the Telegram chat. And, you know, we took kind of a poll, and they're like, oh, that's better. So it's just like, it shows you the strength of that community, right? Like, you know, if there's strong hands or weak hands. And I think that's going to be part of like the sentiment analysis, the data, the metrics that you have. And I think that's why it's really important when you start with issuance, and then just initial distribution. If you find the strong hands out there, that can serve as like kind of the bedrock of the community from like a tokenized community perspective.
How do you think Ethereum fits into this framework that you've outlined? I think that's like that might be too spicy a question, but I'm really curious. Like I personally think I have my biases towards ETH. I'm sure probably everyone on the panel does, but like how do you see its evolution fitting in there?
For ETH in general, I think that like you have to be, what I'm seeing is, you know, crypto and blockchain native tokens are definitely meme driven. It's values driven. And, you know, it's about more than just price action, because, you know, there are people that got an ETH when it was sub $10 and still moving forward and still motivated because the vision has not yet been realized. So it's outside of price. Price is a good metric, in terms of measure of success, but it's not what, you know, you're focused on. So I think that like with Ethereum and in any of these communities, it needs to have that value driven, because, you know, bear markets, bull markets, the cycle continues, and it's really like flushing out and keeping the strong hands as you kind of move forward. And that's the only way to continue growth, I think.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I think that's the best note to wrap up on. And thank you all for kind of doing this double panel.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
Mariano, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody. Scott, Priyanka, James, Blake, Jess. This was really interesting. I'm really happy that we're finally talking about more things that just you know, DeFi, and you know that the space is growing, and you know, accommodating communities and art, you know, collectors. It's an incredible thing to see. So I'll be following closely, and thank you all for being here. I appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks everyone.